Hello, and a warm welcome to another episode of the Creative Resistance Podcast, and to a chat with my final guest of 2025, all-round ace human, Caro Giles. Now, a quick introduction. Caro is an author living in Glasgow with her 4 daughters. She's previously worked as an actor, a musician and a teacher. She's currently a full-time carer to 2 of her daughters who are unable to access education at school. She writes about the challenges of trying to access support from underfunded and often hostile systems, and uses her work to highlight educational and care issues. She's the author of 2 memoirs, 12 Moons and Unschooled, and we dive deep into both stories and both books during our conversation. She writes about female identity, the value of creativity amongst the challenges of full-time caring. She's a monthly columnist for Psychology and has written for publications including the Sunday Times, The Eye and Grazia. She was named BBC Country Files inaugural New Nature Writer of the Year, and her works can also be found on Substack and Instagram, where her handle is @Caro Giles Writes. I love this conversation, and we dive deep into writing as activism, the harnessing of rage, systemic challenges in education, capitalism and the drive to produce cogs in the machine. We talk about wilderness and the empowerment of the future generation. I hope you enjoy. Hello, and a warm welcome to the Creative Resistance Podcast to Caro Giles. How are you?
Hi, Scott. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. Just to give some context, we are speaking to each other, I think, on opposite, some would say rival sides of the country. I'm just outside Edinburgh. And am I right in saying you're sort of Glasgow area?
Yeah, I'm in the West End of Glasgow.
Oh, beautiful. I do love the West End. So,
Yeah, I love it.
yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Really do appreciate it. And really keen just to have a chat about your work, your sort of creative process, you know, your journey to date to get to where you are, and have a deep dive into, you know, how you write and why you write, if that sounds all right.
Keen for it. Let's go.
Perfect. So I've heard you say before on another podcast that you view your writing as a form of activism, which I love, almost a way to make the invisible visible. I just wondered, could you take us back to your sort of creative roots and tell us, you know, was that sense of rebellion always there, or has circumstance forced you to use your creativity to confront sort of perceived injustice?
hmm So my creativity really, like I've always been creative as a child. As a child, I did a lot of music. I played a lot of music and I loved performing. I loved connection with an audience and that interaction. I loved being able to express myself through different creative mediums, I guess. I wouldn't say that my creativity was an act of rebellion or activism until later, but I think as I got older, and as I've grown older, I think I've used my creativity to try and make sense of who I am and try and understand who I am and try to listen to the voice that is inside me. And I think the difference was when I was younger that I was performing, I was playing a character. And once I became a mother in my late 20s, that was when I really started to question my identity. Also, by that point as well, I was already kind of getting lost inside a marriage that was very unhealthy. And so I think at that point, I started writing as a way to make sense of what was happening in my life and try to understand who I was behind all of the everyday acts of care that I was performing for my kids and for my husband. And I think the reason my writing, it's not like I've always written. I didn't train to be a writer or always keep a journal when I was a kid or anything like that. I think I started writing because I was unable to express myself creatively any other way because I was so busy with a family. And so I just started to write a blog. And that was when the kids were really tiny. And it was when my oldest daughter was starting to find our very rigid education system challenging. And I was being told that my child should fit in and I couldn't make her fit in. And in my gut, I felt that I shouldn't be trying to force her to fit in, but people were telling me otherwise. And so at that point, my blogging became a way to try and connect with other people in similar situations. And it became a way for me to try and understand how I was supposed to mother this child at that point, later became children, who was struggling to conform. And I guess from that point onwards, my writing became a form of resistance and a way to just understand the world that I'd found myself in unexpectedly.
Yeah, it's kind of helping yourself make sense of the world around you and bring out the salient points.
I think so, but also I did really miss the act of creating, which I'd done so much in my 20s. I was just always in a theatre or on the road touring or writing music or singing in a band in a grubby bar, or I was always fizzing over with creativity, and that didn't stop when I had a family and when my marriage started to go wrong. That was still there, and it just still had to be dealt with and channeled some way. So yeah, that was when the writing started.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to channel that kind of creativity as well, to to get something so important across. What was the transition from having a blog to having a book published then? Was that, yeah, just intrigued about that.
Yeah, so I was writing the blog, and it was called Five Go at Venturing. And it was funny because when I first started writing the blog, it was called Five Go at Venturing because there was me and my husband and our three children. And by the end of it, I kept calling it Five Go at Venturing because it was me and the four children. And even before my marriage ended, it just felt like me and the four children. I was writing about that. And I guess probably I was starting to write about the disintegration of my marriage as well. And when that ended, my ex-husband was very unhappy about me writing. And I felt very silenced, and I stopped writing the blog. But we then went into lockdown, and I decided at that point that it would be really good to do a master's in creative writing. And actually it was in nature and travel writing because that was the only one I could find that was online that I could access while still caring for all the kids. And I guess at that point I started to take my writing more seriously. And in fact, already before then, I'd been working for an organisation called Corridor 8, and they employ writers to review visual arts events and exhibitions. So I'd been having some of those published, had some free articles published. And I think I just felt that I needed to shift the energy somehow for me creatively. And it was hard for me to do that just on my own, penned in as I was in lockdown with the four kids. And so I really wanted to have the opportunity to reach out and connect with other writers. And I wanted to develop a writing discipline. And ultimately, that was the best thing that I learned from my master's was how to turn up to the page again and again. And that's when my writing got more serious. And I started writing 12 Moons, my first book, during that master's. And actually, yeah, I wrote that in the year that I was doing the master's. I just kept getting up every morning and writing 500 words. And eventually it turned into a book. So that was a really good lesson in perseverance, I
But
think.
do you know what? It's a lesson in perseverance that you shared. Now, I think we first sort of connected on social media. And I remember very early, when I was reading about you as a writer and things, clocking that daily routine was part of your writing practice. And it's amazing how many writers I've seen online just copy that wholeheartedly, light a candle, sit at the desk and hope the words come out. And it's something I'm very good at doing it for about the first 4 weeks of the year, New Year's resolutions, and then it kind of peters away. So hats off to you for being able to stick with it.
And also it's funny because I found it easier in those dark mornings. There was something very kind of quite mesmeric about just getting up and everything was dark and you light a candle, it was very ritualistic. And actually when I wrote about that in the book as well, about how as the light kind of bleached into the day earlier, it became harder to get up and write because it was like I was already on show, and I quite like being hidden away and just tapping those words onto the screen. And I think, and actually, yeah, it was quite meta, the whole thing of 12 Moons, because I spoke so much about writing myself back onto the page after the end of my marriage and after those years of kind of really intense motherhood. And yeah, as I was sitting there in the darkness, it was like I was quite scared to reveal myself, but it was like the darkness really helped me to put myself onto the page. So it was a very special process writing that book that was not repeated in my next book. And I don't know whether I'll be able to repeat it again, but yeah, it was a good first book to write.
Oh, fantastic. In both that book and in Unschooled, which we'll speak about shortly, I think you do a fantastic job of shining a light on that ever-present pressure to conform that I think runs throughout society, certainly in this country. And you've done that, whether that's the reality of single parenting or the battle to have your children seen as individuals with needs of their own within the confines of the education system. And I think it'd be fair to say you write fairly brutally honestly, about the exhaustion and the rage that you need to deal with to carve a place for you and your family. And I'd love to know a little bit more about whether the practice we've just discussed there, has that helped you navigate that rage? Has it helped you channel it and give it structure, or has it just been something else to factor into a very busy schedule?
No, I think it has helped me to harness my rage. I do still feel very, very angry very often. Writing helps me to harness my rage, and so does being out in the wilderness, and so does exercise. But writing felt like a way to make something positive out of something that felt inherently very unfair. And I think I realized relatively soon when I started sharing those very raw, difficult feelings, I think I felt that I did have a way of being able to craft those difficult emotions, those ugly kind of feelings, and make them something that people firstly wanted to read about, but also could really identify with. And the more messages I get from readers, many of them of whom are women who are carers or single parents, the more I know that what I feel is what lots of people feel, but also people appreciate that I am able to paint not just a kind of pastel picture of motherhood and to write about the hard bits as well. I think the challenge for me sometimes, particularly because there has been a very chronic nature to the challenges my family has faced and how much we've been failed, I think the challenge for me is to still make my writing about these difficult things interesting and not too depressing and harrowing, whilst not putting a gloss on it. And that's in 12 Moons, I was able to kind of weave magic through writing about the landscape. In Unschooled, I very much didn't want to give an impression that I was this kind of wonder mother raising this wild tribe of girls against the odds. I wanted to be clear that, when people say things like, "Oh, I don't know how you do it," people say that to me all the time, and I always think, what else? No one else is going to do it, so I'm just doing it. I kind of wanted to get that across in the book, but I didn't. I had to work very hard to temper the kind of gritty grimness of some of the things we've experienced with the love that I feel for my kids. And also I had to try and balance the frustration I feel as a single parent carer who's often unable to meet her own needs with the moments of beauty and freedom that I experience too. So it's a constant juggle to try and get the right balance. And it was much harder to do that with Unschooled, actually.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. And I think, people asking how do you do it because you have to do it and you have no other choice, I suppose, don't you? But I think, yeah, you capture that incredibly well. And I think it's a story that must strike a chord with so many people. And yeah, I think there is a sense of not knowing how you do it. Lockdown with 4 kids and then moving into the battles that you're still dealing with now, I think is huge, definitely. In Unschooled, you move from stories of personal resistance to real systemic resistance against the system that is set up against you right from the start, especially looking at how the system challenges the education of neurodivergent children. In prepping for this, obviously this week the government made a big announcement about overdiagnosis for autism and ADHD in a really kind of brutal, dismissive way, I thought, as well. So I'm intrigued, when you're fighting a system that's so rigid but also so powerful, how do you keep your creative work from becoming consumed by that battle?
I was thinking about this yesterday, and I was thinking that actually, if I'm very honest, I think I have found it hard. I didn't find it hard writing the book in the sense that I didn't find it hard putting into words the experiences that I've had. I did find it hard technically to structure the book and that type of thing, but I didn't find that bit difficult. What I have found difficult since writing the book, which I wasn't expecting because I didn't experience it with 12 Moons, is I'm finding it hard to keep buoyant about what will happen with education in the future. I feel like I've put everything into Unschooled, and that was my battle cry. That is my battle cry for my kids and for kids and families everywhere. And I have found it, I've had good publicity for the book. I've had bits and bobs, on national news, in national newspapers. I couldn't really have asked for very much more. But what has hit me a little bit hard is the realization that nothing is changing quickly enough for my children, and actually the government is still not listening to families like me. So I guess what I take from writing Unschooled as a positive thing is the many messages I get from other parents and carers who are grateful to see themselves on the page, are grateful to know that they are not the only people who feel like they're disappearing and ignored. I'm proud that I've given voice to the experience that I've had, because I know it's not just my experience. But I am finding it difficult to keep talking about the challenges that we have faced as a family in the face of headlines like the ones you talk about this week. Every single week, there is something about education, special education. And actually, and I've said this once before, I sometimes wonder whether, this isn't to blow my own trumpet, but I sometimes wonder whether Unschooled and the premise of Unschooled is slightly too radical for its time at the minute, because I keep being asked to talk as part of campaigns to do with school and school attendance and the impact of school attendance on neurodivergent children or inclusion. And actually, what I'm arguing for in Unschooled is a much more radical overhaul of our education system. And I'm not saying inclusion at any cost. I'm not saying children should be in school. I'm not saying that school is the only way that children can learn, and therefore we should change the system to make school accessible for everybody. And that's where the government are almost at the moment. What I'm saying is many children will learn better outside of a classroom environment. And why are we not talking a bit more about that? And so I think I hope that Unschooled will have a longer lifespan, because I hope at some point we might get there. I hope at some point the government, instead of saying, why isn't your child at school, the government will say, let's listen to what these children need if it's something that's not in school. And we're just so far from that, Scott. I think it's been like I've bumped back down to earth a bit after throwing everything into the book, So I'm not sure that I have. Was the question, how do I balance my?
Yeah, I suppose it was, how do you keep the creative work from being consumed by that? But to be honest, that story I think is arguably more valuable to hear, to just what that journey has been. And am I right in saying that you're not just fighting this battle once, are you? You're fighting this for 2 children.
Yeah, so I did it once already, and now I'm doing it again for another child. And that, I mean, I can't really describe how devastating it was when one child came out of the woods just as another child went back into them again. Also, how despite having all that experience, despite there being a clear record of neurodivergency and challenges within the school environment in my family, the second time I still wasn't believed. The second time I was still challenged. The second time a child was still required to break before anybody could see what was going on, and the recovery takes so much longer as a result. So yeah, I started writing the book from a place of exhaustion and desperation. And when the book came out, I'm so proud that I've managed to encapsulate what our journey has been. Also, I'm still, like, the story hasn't ended there for me. I'm still living that life. And yeah, I can hear it in my voice. I feel I'm really tired, and I'm really, really angry that people are still not listening, and that families like mine are still being failed because we are the fallout. And what I know, as well as someone who is a creative person, is that there are so many ways to succeed in life that are not ticking a box for an exam. I've got 2 kids who are great at exams. They're always, they work above average in school. Like, I know what it is. I know that school can be good for some kids, but I also know that my children, who on paper look like they've failed and that they've missed so much, I also know that they produce the most wonderful pieces of creative work. And it's so important that their voices are heard somehow, because all we hear are the shouty voices of people who are not trying to understand. So yeah, it's tough.
Just purely out of interest, has there been any differences, positive or negative, in the difference between the English education system and the Scottish education system?
Within the school system, my 2 kids who go to school are really thriving. And I think the approach to learning seems to be a bit more liberal, a bit more be who you want to be. There's a bit more of an awareness of neurodivergence and things being put in place for that if necessary. In terms of my kids who can't go to school, I was told pretty soon when I arrived in Scotland, there is not provision for children who can't attend school, but people are a bit more understanding about it. So my situation has been one of my kids is 18, so is too old now anyway, and she's just finishing her learning online. She's great. My 13-year-old who can't attend school, I can't even get her on roll in school in Scotland because I can't get her into a building. And if I can't get her on roll, I can't ask for specialist provision. So I've come with my EHCP, which is my legal document from England, which says my child cannot thrive in school. She's not to go to school. And it doesn't mean anything across the border, even though I was only 25 miles south of the border. So there's no provision for her. And because I'm not allowed to enroll her or not able to enroll her, she's not in a system anywhere. So no one's accountable. I'm the only one who's accountable. And so that's not coming from a place necessarily of unkindness or not wanting to support me. It's just the system is not fit for purpose, because I'm sending emails saying my child's still not on roll. We'd like to access this. So, I'm funding her education myself whilst not being able to effectively go out to work. It's not cool.
No, it's not cool. I'm so sorry you're having to deal with that. It's
nothing new. It's just to say that that's why I get up in the morning and I write, because otherwise, that's a depressing tale I've just told you there. And it's important for me as someone living one wild life, and it's important for me as a mother of 4 daughters who just have this one childhood with me, for that not to define us and for that not to define my family. So I guess the act of writing and being proactive and being angry and being outspoken and also trying to weave something beautiful amongst it all is a way to try and carve out the best life that I can for me and the kids.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. You're saying it's the depressing tale, and I think you are at the kind of the harder end of the spectrum for what you've had to deal with. But I think that conversation around conformity versus scope to be creative within school, it's a regular one in our house, because it is. And I think so. I've got one daughter halfway through high school and one in her last year of primary school, and I think as they've got older, my wife and I have been much more willing to just be flexible. I think I grew up certainly, and you did exactly what was expected at school, and that my parents were very much, well, you go to school at these times and you do this thing, and it was that kind of conveyor belt. And I like to think that we're moving away from expecting every kid to conform, because the exam system isn't for everybody, and nor is sitting still on the same chair beside the same people for a whole day whilst being expected to focus on stuff that you're just not interested in. There seems very little scope for creativity and for kids to pursue their own interests or take a deep dive into a project that interests them. It's all very much off the peg. You should focus on this stuff,
Yeah, and there's a line I wrote in Unschooled. I can't remember. I'm just paraphrasing it, but it's something about we're scared. We're scared to let our kids run wild. We're scared of what will happen if we don't contain them. And I do think that that's true. Where in my experience, and I get criticism from people who are not like-minded, who don't understand kind of the demand avoidance that can come hand in hand with autism, and don't understand the nature of curiosity in children. I have had to de-school myself, because I'm a trained teacher. I've had to learn that I don't have to tell the kids what to do or tell the kids what to learn. More often than not, they will immerse themselves in something they're really passionate about and produce something beautiful, or I will just kind of facilitate their learning and guide them and say, oh yeah, we could look here, let's try that, or why have we visited this place, this might be interesting. And the result is not only it's not the same, it's better, because the kids really want to learn, they're really engaged, and they are listening to themselves, they're learning what it is to be autonomous, which is not what I learned at school. And for all I loved school, and I did love school, I was lucky, I was academic, I was interested, I was energetic, I was an extrovert, I got on with people. I also learned to conform, and I think that has not been a good thing. And so I've had to unlearn that. I've had to unschool myself in conforming and sit comfortably with sitting on the fringes and sitting on the edge and looking in from the outside. And I hope that is something that I can teach my kids. Although interestingly, I've got one child who very much wants to conform because she sees us as a family that's a bit kind of out there, that has not fitted in. So she very much just wants to be the same
We've had a bit
as
of that
everyone
as
else.
well.
Yeah, which is also a teenage thing, isn't it? But I can also see in her, she's like, no, I don't want to be this different person. I just want to fit in with everyone else. So that's quite interesting how we rebel against what our parents are trying to imbue in us.
So we speak about cogs in the machine a lot. Like the system is designed to churn out cogs for the big capitalist machine, and it is really difficult to step outside that a little bit, isn't it?
It's really hard because, and that's why there's this problem in fully dismantling our school system, because it feeds into capitalism and it enables people to go out to work, and people are confused about what that would look like if children were not in school every day from 9 till 3 or 9 till 4 with an after school club so that parents could pick them up later. what would happen? Society would break. And actually, with some imagination, I'm sure society wouldn't break and actually might be a lot healthier and save a lot of money in diagnostic appointments and mental health care.
No, hats off to you, and thank you for the honesty in which you share all that stuff, not just in the books, but I think anyone that follows you on social media, and I'll put links to your social media in this as well, I think you do a lot of stories and kind of, voice to camera chat as well about the realities of stuff, and I think that is equally as powerful to see it almost in real time. They kind of got a big meeting today. I'm absolutely terrified. I'm raging. I'm this and that. And I think that stuff's important and it strikes a chord too. And also, it does a really good job in showing that you used the word depression earlier on, but there's also a whole load of beauty in there as well, in doing your own thing and actually, fighting so that your kids can be themselves. I think there's something really beautiful in that. So, but speaking about depressing tales, you and I have joined a really shit club in this year or something. I don't know how long for you, but in the last sort of few months, we both had to deal with cancer diagnosis, haven't we? So I got diagnosed with leukemia, chronic myeloid leukemia at the end of October, and treatment is going really well. It's going pretty well so far.
Yeah, you look quite well. How are you feeling, Scott?
Yeah, on the whole, okay. I take incredible medication, one tablet a day, and I would say the biggest issue I've got now is the kind of side effects from that, which is a bit of fatigue and a bit of nausea. But it's incredible. If we were having this conversation in the year 2000, I can't remember the exact stats, but it's something ludicrous that I would have a 30% survival rate, like chance of survival. And now the consultant said to me, you will die with this, not of this. So taking that tablet a day, most people, and fingers crossed all being well, most people go on to live a normal life expectancy with just regular checkups and taking the medication. So it's been a roller coaster for sure and a lot to get my head around. But it's, yeah, I'm doing okay. And what about you? Is it a form of skin cancer that you've been navigating?
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm quite dismissive of my cancer because it's not like a really bad cancer. I did an essay about it on Substack last week. I was like, it's not the bad cancer. Yeah, no, just on my head, I had a BCC, which is a basal cell carcinoma, and they're really common. But I don't know why I've got one because I've lived in the north for most of my life, where there's not very much sun, and not used sunbeds or anything. But anyway, I had one on my cheek last year that was removed, and then I had to go and have this one removed from my head. I also had a biopsy for a melanoma, which did make me very frightened because I just thought, oh no, that is a bad cancer. Actually, luckily that one wasn't one. Yeah, no, it's made me feel vulnerable, but I think what it highlights for me is the challenge of making time for myself, even to go and have some cancer removed. It's just really hard as a single parent carer. I'm fortunate that I have a partner now who lives nearby who was able to help me so I could go and have the treatment. But there's something a bit terrifying about thinking, actually, if I go down, there isn't anyone else. That's always my feeling around illness as a single parent.
Yeah, I bet.
And also for this one, I just felt a bit vain because it's right in the middle of my forehead. And I was like, I do lots of stuff on camera. That's why there haven't been as many camera stories recently. But yeah, no, I'm absolutely fine. And what was really nice was that the NHS was incredible. And for so many years, the NHS has really failed me and the kids. And so when I go to an appointment where someone is effective and kind and listens to me, it's just a glorious thing. So yeah, my experience was good. Yeah.
No, that's
Have
good.
you found that you are beginning to change the way you work creatively as a result of your diagnosis, or are you pouring your creativity into something different as a result of that to make sense of it, or what's happening for
It's
you?
a really good question. Yeah, definitely. So I normally like write, I've written poems and some longer form stuff. I find that really difficult to do. So a few people have said, have you channeled what's going on into that? And I've not really. However, this whole podcast thing that we're on now, um, it's kind of started sort of mapped that journey. So I recorded the first few episodes when I was having some symptoms but didn't know what it was. So this whole thing has pretty much gone live since I've discovered that, which has been a different type of creativity because it's like some people say, oh no, it's still creativity. But for me, it's just having a chat, it's having a conversation with someone. And I feel really privileged to be able to do that. But I think it's forced me to maybe be a bit more vulnerable, to slow down, to, engage with people and have those conversations has been really useful and a really positive experience. Yeah. What about you?
I was going to say there's something interesting about, like, I didn't know whether to talk about having skin cancer on my face. I didn't know whether that just made me someone that talked about myself too much, which is, what I often think about as a memoirist. But what I think when I'm listening to you talking, and what people have said to me since I've said, oh yeah, this is why I've got this mark on my head, I had skin cancer. Like, I've had messages already. Like, I'm not a famous person. I've only got like 4,000 followers, but I have messages from people saying, I've been to the doctor to have my skin checked because I saw your story and things like that. Or, oh, thank you for talking about this. You know, it's really interesting to talk about vanity, and same for you as well. And even perhaps more so because men are so notoriously uncomfortable often about talking about vulnerability or, you know, getting themselves checked out for stuff. So I think it is a creative act, but also it's like a public service act. If you feel able to kind of have conversations about this in public, I think it's only a good thing, really.
I think so, and it felt that was quite important to me. So I did I did a post that I put on social media and even put it on the dreaded
Yeah, I
LinkedIn,
loved that.
which I hate. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
You did a really beautiful job because you were very vulnerable, and that vulnerability really came through as well. I thought you were very brave.
Oh, thank you for that. And it was an interesting one. I weighed up. I was like, is this going to come across as kind of attention seeking? But for me, the big thing, like, so obviously it's big, scary words. And I suppose, firstly, I should say, I feel a massive sense of gratitude because it's not one of the more aggressive types of leukemia. It's such a horrible word. People hear it,
Yeah.
they assume the worst. And especially when it's like an incurable kind. So I think I've got to get my head around the fact I've got to live with that. But I do feel grateful that it's not something more aggressive. So I was worried about, would it be attention seeking? But then I thought to myself, actually, the biggest thing and the biggest lesson I learned for this, when words started getting out to friends, old friends and new friends, people would get back in touch, say, oh, I'm so sorry. And I had this really shocking moment where I went to text somebody who I would class as one of my closest mates, and I opened WhatsApp and I hadn't texted them one on one. We'd been in group chats. I hadn't been in touch with them one on one since 2022. And this is someone who I would be like, he is a solid, really good mate. Like, you know, if you asked me to list my top 10 best pals, he would be in there. And I
Wow.
thought, I've not had that contact. And I would say the most positive thing since this news has dropped for me, I've had more coffee catch ups or dog walks or phone calls with guys that I've not spoken to for ages, because I think social media makes us really crap at that. And I think as men, we're really crap at it. You never pick the phone up for a chat. So that's been a really positive aspect of it.
That's lovely to
Definitely.
hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you with the sort of creativity angle? Have you managed to just plow on and write through it, or has it changed things?
I don't think it's really changed anything because do you know, the awful thing is that I knew about this for a few months and I just shoved it to the back of my head until almost the operation was sitting right on top of me because it was not as stressful as some of the other things that, that are in my life. So, like the stress of trying to look after my poorly daughter, or you know, having relocated the kids, or not being able to work and worrying about money, like all of that was so much more stressful than the fact that I had cancer on my head. So I think I arrived at it and was like,
Such a
oh,
ridiculous sentence to say. More stressful than the fact I had cancer on my head. Yeah.
that is the chronically challenging nature of my life. So when I got to it, um, my friend came with me to the hospital, and actually it was just really nice to be looked after and allow myself to be vulnerable for a few days. And I got back and I had like a lie-in the next morning because my boyfriend took the kids to school. I mean, the next day I was back at a Christmas concert feeling really faint and thinking I should still probably be lying in bed here. But yeah, and I've just kind of cracked on, to be honest, Scott, because yeah, and it's not that serious, you know. It's been a bit tender, but it's not a big deal. It's just another thing to get done,
A
you
thing
know.
to deal with.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, though. And yeah, I'm glad that we're both feeling positive about the situations for sure. Um, Going back to something you mentioned earlier on, so you mentioned the wilderness and getting out into the wild has been quite important to you. Certainly in 12 Moons, especially, you spoke about the landscape, not as a kind of pastoral backdrop, but as a sort of harsh elemental force that was an important part of you. So I suppose I'm intrigued, do you see like the immersion in the wild, getting out into the wild and into the wilderness as a form of resistance against that modern world that demands comfort, convenience, conformity?
I think I never lived in a city as a child, so, and my family were like a real, like, let's go for walks on the weekend type of family. So I'm very used to being outside in nature, but once I was kind of straining at the bit to leave home and live in a city. So when I moved back to Northumberland, that was kind of an accident, really. And I guess my relationship with the wilderness there was a way to try and make myself feel at home in an environment that actually I didn't probably really want to be in. If I'm honest, I felt very lonely and isolated living so rurally. It was a nice place to be with the children, and I liked for them that they could be wild and they could be free living there. I think once my marriage ended and I still had to stay in such a rural location as a single mum, as an extrovert, as someone hiding away in the house, at that point, I guess my relationship with the wilderness really intensified, because it was my main relationship beyond the one with my kids. And I think it coincided with me trying to understand where I'd gone wrong and who I was, and to try and kind of feel a bit more comfortable unleashing my wildness and not kind of be this person who conformed and kept everybody happy and tried to be shiny all the time. And I think, to be honest as well, I really shut myself down when my marriage ended, and I had a lot of passion inside me, but I was very scared to open myself up to another relationship. And so kind of thrashing about in the sea and running through storms on hills was an alternative to kind of a sexual passion that had been missing from my life for ages, but that I was still too scared to try and inhabit. So I guess you could say, yes, that the way I immersed myself in nature and the wild was a way to harness unconformity and get used to being the person that didn't say yes all the time and please everyone all the time. And I've said before as well that being outside in big weather on wide beaches was also a really beautiful way to make my big feelings feel okay, but also to make me feel small in a big world. And it kind of made me feel a bit less significant, but in a really good way. Like, it minimized some of the big problems and feelings I was having that felt hard to hold. So it was funny in a way that I so much wanted to leave that environment and be in a city, because I did learn so much from living in Northumberland, you know. But
I was
now
going
I
to
live
ask that, like, how did that relationship with place change? Because West End of Glasgow, rural Northumberland, are very different beasts.
Yeah, really different. Well, but I always wanted to move to a city. Even at the end of my marriage, my husband and I were talking about moving to a city, because it's quite hard as your children get older to meet need when you're in a tiny, tiny town. You know, older kids need different things. But for financial reasons and health reasons for the kids, I ended up staying there for much longer. So I'd always wanted to live in a city, and I'd actually always wanted to live in Scotland. I'd taken the kids, the five of us had really wonderful holidays in Scotland, you know, big adventures. And then I guess I fell in love with someone who lives in Glasgow, and it felt like an opportunity to make a change. But it was a huge leap of faith to leave the safety of a house that I had a tiny mortgage on, where my kids knew every street. And yeah, it was a leap of faith emotionally, and it was a leap of faith financially. It was a leap of faith everythingly. But it seems to have been a good move so far. Certainly being in a city really suits me and suits most of my children. The people in Glasgow are very friendly. I feel more held by the city than I did in Northumberland, where I was very lonely. But I do miss the sea, and I spend a lot of time talking about how wonderful the trees are in Glasgow, because they're the closest I get to kind of mighty nature. But we drove out to Ayrshire at the weekend, and it was just so good to smell seaweed, and just odd as well to be on the other side of the country, Scott, because I'm so familiar with the North Sea and the East Coast, and I don't know the West Coast at all. So in a way, it feels like an opportunity to really immerse myself in another new landscape beyond Glasgow as well, and see
Yeah.
what the West Coast is like.
So that's
Yeah.
a great gateway to the West Coast. I've lived entirely on the East Coast of Scotland my
Oh,
entire
have
life.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
sort of Carnoustie originally, uni in Aberdeen, and then my wife and I moved from Aberdeen. Well, she was my girlfriend at that point, obviously, from uni to Edinburgh, and we're now south of Edinburgh. So yeah, literally up and down that East
I
Coast of
don't know
Scotland.
Aberdeen at all. I'd love to go further. I know the Northwest, but not the Northeast. It's such a fabulous country, though. I'm so excited.
I would focus on getting to know the West if I was you. Yeah, I mean, Aberdeen's great. It's a great place to go to uni, but it's I wouldn't be rushing there from where you are. Definitely.
I think
I've now said that I'm just insulted loads of people from
feeling
Aberdeen.
really bad. I've been to Aberdeen. I performed a play in Aberdeen, but I don't know much
Nice.
about the countryside around it. But
Some amazing coastline. I'm saying that some of the coastline, there's like cliffs right up that coast that are incredible. But from where you are, you've got easy access into the Trossachs and up into the kind of it's beautiful, beautiful. So big question to finish with. So when I was prepping for this, I was thinking that your work feels like a tribute to, maybe even a blueprint for, your 4 daughters. If you're writing as the resistance, what is the freedom that you're hoping to win for them on the other side of it?
I mean, as we've already said, the systems that have made our lives hard are rigid and underfunded and hostile, and they don't look to change anytime soon, although I know that there is a growing movement and that hopefully there'll be change. But I think what I hope I can show the kids through some of the decisions I've made and through my creative practice, because it's not easy to end a marriage, and it's not easy to, even if it's the right thing to do, it's still not an easy thing to do, and it's still hard for your children, and you still have to live with that. But I still stand by that decision as the best decision I made, and I hope that they will see that it's okay to put yourself first, because I think as a girl and as a woman, I didn't put myself first until very, very recently. I also hope they will know it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to feel big feelings, like all the things that I didn't really do. I had a good childhood. I've had a good life, but I think I would like my children not to feel that they need to keep themselves small in a way that I thought I had to. And so I guess when they see me sitting at my desk early writing, they see a woman who is trying to carve out space for herself and make her voice heard. And I hope when they see me angry or tearful because I'm fighting hard against systems that are destroying us in some ways, I hope they see someone who is brave, and I hope they see someone who isn't scared to show how she feels. And I guess that's what I hope from trying to carve out some kind of creative career for myself, is some kind of emotional freedom for them rather than anything else, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's really, really beautiful. And I think you are all of those things, and it's really clear that that is what you're fighting for. And, in doing so and sharing so openly, you're giving other people permission to do the same. So huge thank you for that as well. I think it is really inspirational stuff. What's next? What comes next for you, Caro?
So I thought, I want to write another memoir because I love writing memoir. Then I started writing some memoir and thought, it's a bit similar to the last memoir. And I don't know how honest I can be. Like, I wanted to write about unconventional love. And in doing so, as a memoir, I would need to interrogate really closely my own relationship with my boyfriend. And I didn't really feel like that was something that I wanted to expose through memoir. So I'm going to try and write a novel. And I'm saying that you're the first person I've said that to outside of like my writing group. And I'm saying it
News.
because when I wrote 12 Moons, the way I got that book written was by having the kind of the arrogance and the whatever to say, I'm writing a book, I'm going to write a book. And so I do feel that that's worked for me in the past. So I feel like if I declare I'm writing a novel, I have to write the bloody novel. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But it will explore lots of the themes that I already write about, like female identity, unconventional love, light and dark, all of that. But I'm hoping there might be a little more freedom to explore different places and different people if I'm writing it as fiction. So that's my plan. But I'm going to keep doing the life writing, which I love to do via my Substack. So I'm hoping I'll get the best of both worlds. But like you, it seems really good for the beginning of the year. I'll be there with my candle banging out the words. And then by February, I'll be like, oh my God,
Yeah.
really flagging. So we'll see how it goes.
And you've got a column as well, is that right? You have a monthly column?
Yeah. I write a monthly column for Psychologies, which is all about my wildlife, juggling various children and this, that and the other. So
I will stick links to all of the relevant places, social media, websites and everything in the show notes. But just to say a huge thank you for doing today. Really do appreciate it. It's been fascinating chat, and I'm sure listeners will get a lot out of it. So huge thanks for your time, Carol. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott. Loved it.